Step into the shadows with us at Paranormal M, where mysteries abound. Subscribe and activate notifications to be the first to experience our latest tales of the supernatural. Get ready for a roller coaster ride of intrigue and fascination. Ask Reddit 1. I have two that happened the same summer, and very close days. First, a little bit of background. My sister's 29 and I'm 21. We come from a big family. We have lots of cousins, and they have lots of kids. In 2018, our grandparents died, so everybody's still a bit sad. Well, they were the pillars of our family, and we all considered their house the house, since most of the grandkids grew up there. That's where all the family used to meet. But we are all dealing however we can. Now on with the story. One night I was alone at the house. My sister was out working, and I would be too if it wasn't for my aunt and my mom that left the wood door closed, but not the crystal one. The one I couldn't go out because I had no keys to close it. Pretty cool of my aunt. So no one coming from the back door could come in. But from the main door somebody could. They couldn't go earlier to do the groceries anyway, because my sister and I were taking care of our little cousin. She was 4. And if they left, she wouldn't notice and she would start crying. So I decided to take it easy and start playing some game on my phone while I wait. Suddenly I started listening to a guitar, but it was so low I had to put my phone closer to my ear. While I'm doing that, I start thinking my phone has no volume, because I had, in fact, silenced it. I go to the balcony and check that there's no one playing the guitar outside. The street's full of restaurants, so it isn't weird to have people playing a guitar or something there. I decide to think that it's an auditory hallucination. The first time it ever happened to me in about 21 years of being alive, but it makes sense. After a while, I start hearing the sounds of the chairs downstairs moving. Not that creepy, because there are like 4 cats that like to sleep in the chairs, so it's okay, I guess. Creepy that there are 2 chairs moving at the same time, but okay. Then someone knocks on the crystal door. From the top of the stairs, I look down. I see no one close to the door. I don't even go downstairs. I go straight up to the front room and check the balcony. No one in that door. Go to the other room that's up the wood door, and no one there either. The people that come from there are old people, so they walk way slower than I do. Yeah. I decide to lay in the bed again, thinking I must have misheard everything. And then I fucking heard it. I heard my 4-year-old cousin laughing downstairs, and at this point I stop moving. I text a friend when I'm scared. I tell her that the house is big, 2 floors, and I decide to stop being scared, so I should do her a house tour. Never in my life have been so brave, because my sister, my father, and one of my cousins have seen ghosts, so yeah, I do believe in them. But I decided to go check anyway. I go turning on every single light I can, and by the time I get there, there's no one at all. I go back upstairs and have the courage to turn off all the lights, since now it gets angry when the lights are all on, unnecessarily. Or as they wrote here, unnecessarily. That's a new one. I don't hear a sound anymore until my mom and my aunt are back from the supermarket. Ask Reddit 2. Too many to list, but here's a good one. I'm Native American. I'm Oglala Lakota, Navajo, Apache, and Cherokee. I know this sounds like lots of tribes, but most of my Cherokee blood comes from my mother's side, and the Western blood comes from my father's side. All in all, I'm a half-indigenous person as far as blood's concerned, although I am a full-time, culturally involved Native American individual. My girlfriend is also, and she's a Chickasaw. When it comes to the area of the country that I live in, you don't run across very many Native people. This leads to most natives in this area knowing most natives. There's one of these natives who worries me to the core. He's a very old Indian who's been all over the country and settled a stone's throw away from the river in a small shack with 2 dogs and 1 cat. He seems like an innocent old Indian man, but he's very dangerous, and he's not good people. I've only been to his shack once. My girlfriend used to be a good friend with an old fellow because he seemed like an innocent old native elder, but at some point, she let him borrow something. A long time after realizing this person was bad news, she needed it back. We jumped in the car, went to pay this old man a visit for the sole reason of getting her charger back. We drove down the winding, beautiful roads of Middle Tennessee and onto a farm. We got out, and he wasn't at home yet, so I walked around his front yard. There was an old dog chained to an umbrella next to his food and water. A derelict old pickup truck that hadn't driven in a long time with a really skinny cat hiding underneath it, and a little chicken coop. The whole place gave me a great amount of discomfort before he ever arrived. And knowing that this man did very bad medicine on people didn't help my nerve. He bragged about being able to kill a car on the road with his medicine. He also bragged about being a shapeshifter. At some point, I noticed the old dog chained to the umbrella began to have a panic attack, and the skinny cat out of the truck no longer wanted to feel the embrace of a human hand and retreated back into the unreachable refuge of the truck's rotting drive shaft. I didn't know what had caused this sudden shift in nature's mood until I looked down the dusty gravel road and saw a beat-up old Dodge pickup around the corner and make its way toward the shack. He got out and invited us inside. The shack was cramped and somewhat smelly. I still don't know how 2 people lived there, including his wife. The pit bull in the kennel inside the shotgun shack was losing its mind, so he let it out into the yard. He gave us a biscuit recipe, showing off his drum that plays itself at night, unless it has a blanket over it. Invited us outside to talk for a minute. Once outside, he told us how he used to use this medicine to kill several people a long time ago. His eyes were dead. He had cold black eyes that had a silver ring around them. The only person I've ever seen like it. My girlfriend and I left right after that with her charger. A couple of weeks later, I was coming home at about midnight. My car has HIDs, so I can normally see pretty far at night. As I made my way down the gravel road that leads to my driveway and into my driveway, I didn't see anything. I got out of my car and went to my passenger side door to get something out of my seat, and that's when I noticed a huge, scraggly canine as tall as my mailbox standing in the gravel. All my hair stood on end like I had just been electrocuted. Where was it a second ago when my lights were in the same spot? It was locked into me. I yelled at it and walked a little further down the gravel, keeping an eye on me. Then it began walking toward me. I yelled again, grabbed something from my seat, and when I turned around, it was gone. No noises, just gone. That's what it's actually like to encounter a skinwalker. It's a whole lot more than a twig snapping, but also less sometimes. Ask Reddit 3. The day we moved into the second house my parents bought, my grandpa died. It was a brand new house. No one had died in it or anything for some reason, but I always got a very eerie feeling from the second we moved in. The first weekend we moved in, my grandma stayed in her room, the second master/guest room, and she mentioned to us that she kept hearing an old-timey spelling, telephone. It was coming from the closet. No one's phone had rang that night, so we just thought it was weird, but thought nothing of it, and over the years, she and anyone else that stayed in that room would experience the same thing every time they stayed in there. After a few years, my sister and I couldn't get along. My mom designated the guest bathroom right next to the guest room across the house as my bathroom, so there'd be no longer arguments and touching each other's stuff. At night, I wouldn't use the bathroom, just use my sister's, because it would creep me out so badly. When I would shower, I would hear my name being called, knocking coming from the guest room closet. The bathroom ran along the closet in the guest room. Very distinct knocking on the door, and the knob would sound like someone was messing with it. At first, I thought it was just my sister fucking with me, but after a few times of me experiencing those things whenever I was in the house alone, I knew it wasn't her. Everyone but my mom's wife thought I was crazy. When I'd tell them that I'd hear it around the same time, there was really things kicking up in my room. My mom would ask us if we were in the guest room at night because she would hear someone walking there all hours of the night. The guest room was above the main master bedroom. There was only one time it was actually us in there, but every other time we thought she was crazy and figured she was just imagining things. Then one night my mom and I were in a room watching movies. Kept hearing something walking around upstairs. All the animals were with us, and the door to that room was always closed, so they couldn't get in there. She paused the movie so she could go smoke. We heard very heavy walking upstairs, and when we started to walk out of the room, we stood there for a minute, and it continued for another 30 seconds or so. I always hated that house, but I hated it even more after that. Ask Reddit 4. Not trucker, but I have 2 paranormal driving stories. One morning I got in my car about to head to work. I had a sense of a small boy sitting in the middle of my back seat. I couldn't recognize who it was, age or era, etc. I could only physically see or hear this entity. I was just having this feeling of presence. It said nothing, stayed there for about a minute. I had an overwhelming urge to tighten down my seatbelt super tight as it could possibly go. I've never done this before or since this one time. It's not a normal behavior, and I felt like I had to do it. On my way to work, something didn't stop before crossing the highway. I teed the person at 65 miles an hour, spun and ended up in the center median. Walked away with just a bit tongue. Story 2. I was at a friend's house and we ordered a pizza. My friend and I hopped in his car and we drove to pick up the pizza, and then we drove across Broadway, which is like a 2-way each way, light turns, etc. I felt this overwhelming darkness looming in the area of the intersection. It didn't feel like before, no kid in the back seat, just a darkness looming over the area. I couldn't tell how soon something bad was going to happen, minutes, hours, days, weeks, I don't know. It's also not a feeling I've had before or since. We drive across Broadway, go to a pizza place about an hour, or rather a mile down the road. Kind of felt like writing it down on a piece of paper. There's going to be an accident here. But it felt kind of foolish having no sense of the feeling in terms of context or time. So we picked up the pizza, drove back. On our way through the intersection, a lady stopped at the light, took off and drove right in front of us. We hit her car and came to a stop at the intersection. Now here's the odd part. The lady was stopped in the turn lane waiting to go in the same direction we were. She took off on a red on active cross traffic. It wasn't solely us crossing, but cars kind of decently spread out intermittent. She also drove straight rather than taking her planned turn. I even asked the lady why she went, and she said she had no idea why she went. It wasn't even an intentional act for her. Alright, that's all I got. These both happened long ago in my youth, 16, 18, I'm 40 now. These things aren't any kind of normal occurrence, gift, or sight. They were very unique instances. No repeats, they were in their own space, no similarities, and kind of sadly nothing new. But then again, I guess I'd need to have another accident to have it. Ask Reddit 5. I have 2 stories. Once was hauling agriculture near the farm in Sacramento Delta around 3:30 or 4 a.m. It was pitch black and an owl flew in front of me and then took a hard right so that it was flying the same direction right in front of my windshield. Sadly, it wasn't flying as fast as my truck, and the owl hit the windshield hard and then tumbled and got caught in the driver's side rearview mirror a foot away from my face. A small droplet of the owl's blood dripped onto my window. He just stared at me and died. He was stuck, and I was not about to touch him because I was scared beyond words, but after a few miles of this, he slowly fell off. It was disturbing. Another time, it was pitch black in the middle of the night, and I was traveling on Interstate 5 in Central Valley in a relatively empty road. In the other lane, which was elevated about 30 yards and separated by another 30 yards of grass and dirt, I saw a single headlight of a motorcycle coming out from a bend far in front of me. As I traveled fast and he traveled fast, our paths were getting closer, but he didn't make the turn with the gentle curve of the road. Instead, and this happened right around the time after I had just passed him, I saw the headlight bounce wildly as if he had fallen asleep and driven straight off the freeway. I didn't see him and wasn't sure if my eyes were fooling me. Called it in on the CB and wasn't sure if what I saw had happened or if they ever found him or anything. I may have seen someone perish, or I may have imagined the whole thing. I would have helped the owl. No offense. Ask Reddit 6. A good friend of mine told me this story years ago. He's a stereotypical old big bad trucker. I've seen some weird stuff with him while driving in South Texas along the border. He never batted an eye, and while telling me the story had goosebumps, and a concerned expression too. Which from this guy is about the equivalent of having a trembling lip and shit-stained pants. I'll tell this story in the first person, as if he told it to me. Years ago in the late 90s, I was on my way home from my house in Central Texas. I was heading to Laredo to pick up a load. It was early morning, around 4 or 5. I'd just come off a string of days at home, so I knew I wasn't tired. I'm on one of those 2-lane winding roads in the absolute middle of bumfuck nowhere. That's when I see something on the side of the road or the edge of them. My high beams. First, I thought it was roadkill, as it usually is the case. As I get closer, I see that it seems like it is roadkill, and there's someone crouching over the deer carcass. I remember thinking either this guy's taking the antlers as a trophy, or he's fucking sick. As I got closer still, I can now see that this guy's eating the fucking deer. He's pulling chunks of meat from the stomach, bringing them up to his face. At this point, he stops mid-motion and looks up at me. Not at my truck, but at me. It stands up, and that's when I see that it's fucking huge, brown, and covered in hair. I remember thinking at this point, oh fuck, this thing's standing on the tiny shoulder looking at me. By this point, maybe 3 seconds have passed, and I'm about to the point in the road where he's standing at. I didn't even think of stopping. In fact, I'm starting to lay on it and get the hell out of there. As I'm passing it, it looks at me. Again, not at the truck, it's looking through the driver's side windshield at me. He obviously has the intelligence to know that there's a driver in here and knows where I'm sitting. As I start to pass, him and I can still see its head above the hood of an old needle-nosed Pete. Old truck design where the hood goes straight out of the windshield, known for being tall and difficult to see around. This thing's fucking giant. I remember seeing what looked like a human intelligence in its eyes. Scared the shit out of me. My wine is kicking in. On to the next one. Ask Reddit 7. A few months back, I was taking a race hauler back east from California. I was on the I-10 in New Mexico. I got tired. Decided to stop on an off-ramp. In parts of New Mexico, there are off-ramps that are literally nothing more than an off- and on-ramp. No roads to take you when you exit. Typically, you have wide shoulders, and I don't consider it an unsafe place to stop. When I took the exit, there was a small travel trailer pulled over and it appeared the driver was getting some sleep. So I felt better not really being the only one in the middle of nowhere. I slept for 3 or 4 hours and I woke up. Still very dark out and cold. I looked in my mirror and noticed the camper was gone. I don't remember how long I sat there, maybe a few minutes, and then I looked in my mirror again. Noticed a vehicle very close to the rear of my trailer with no lights on. Honestly, I saw the silhouette and thought it was a cop. Didn't think much of it. Figured he was taking a break or maybe even running my plates as a rig. I was pretty expensive. Quite commonly stolen. A few more minutes passed. I saw the headlights flash. Unsure of what was happening, I turned on the truck and prepared to get the hell out of there. The headlights flashed quickly 2 more times, and then I heard a door slam. An older Chevy Silverado took off past me and crossed over the highway and headed west on 10. Waited about 5 minutes, and after turning on all the exterior lights, I walked around the truck. Best I can tell, they were planning to siphon diesel out of my tanks. The cap was off at the right of the side tank, and also the side entry door had pry marks near the latch. Still freaks me out a bit, and I'm more careful where I stop these days. Strange, frightening feeling in my relative's house. Frankly speaking, I've never experienced any kind of supernatural or paranormal thing, and this is the main reason why I was hesitating before writing the post. But here we go. I'm pretty interested in your thoughts and pretty interested in your comments on the story. The beginning of the story starts 1.5 years ago. I and my girlfriend went on a vacation to Eastern European. Okay. The exact location's not really important, but the site was around 500 kilometers far from our home. We had agreed with one of my distant relatives that we were going to stay at their house during the last 2 days of the vacation. This house wasn't far away from where we had spent our vacation. To put into context the circumstances, I live in a very small countryside village in the middle of a vast forest. The village has around 400 inhabitants, so a really tiny one. Most of them are elders, of course. The first day and night went just fine and dandy, but we agreed that we were going to leave the house on our last day. That's because we had to go to another relative or something like that. Meaning that we had been left on our own in the house for the last night. End of the background story. Things are getting tenser now. So we weren't in the house during the daytime. We only arrived back at 7 or 8 p.m., so in the evening. Just right after we entered the house, we were getting like this really strange feeling. Both of us simultaneously. There were not any extraordinary or odd things, not even a single voice. All calm. But we did feel an utter fear. I mean, literally, it came from nowhere, out of the blue, but the feeling was very intense. We even went out to the courtyard to get some fresh air. Went back, but the situation wasn't getting any better. Cannot explain why we were so frightened of what caused the experience, but it was terrible. We felt like we were in some sort of a danger, even considered leaving the house and going home during the evening. The home was about 450 kilometers away from where we were. We were basically just tired at that point. Eventually, we went back into the house, locked the door, tried to get some sleep. Unsurprisingly, it did not work, because we were completely frightened. We just sat in silence and listened. And to be honest, I get goosebumps when I think about it. There was no voice, no knock, no nothing. That very bad feeling like something very bad was going to happen. We were so frightened. Eventually we fell asleep and nothing happened during the night, but in the morning we packed our stuff as fast as we could and we went off. Well, we have no explanation for the story. I've never experienced such a thing before, and it was shocking. I know it was not only shocking, but unbelievable as well. I didn't mention this experience to my relative, though. A whistle in the woods. Let me start out by saying I live in Massachusetts. Normally, people think of one of the 4 things, location-wise, for Massachusetts. Boston, Cape Cod, Salem, and the rest. The rest I've taken to calling spooky woods. This is about the spooky woods in western Massachusetts. I bought my house almost exactly a year ago. It's a 2-story brick square that was built in 1920. A lot of people think it has a kind of a commercial use. That's because it was maybe something like that before it was used as a house. It's almost 500 feet away from the road with gravel drive, and delivery peeps don't much care for it. I've seen a couple of things out of the corner of my eye, like a brown cat. The only thing my cats have ever alerted me to has been a mouse in the walls, but the most important detail is my backyard. Well, and the woods. My backyard is a sort of a conservation area, so it wouldn't ever be developed into housing. I've seen bears with cubs, deers, bobcat, opossums, owls, and a lot of other critters. I've heard even more, which brings me to an event that happened about a couple of weeks ago. Actually, thinking better of it, it happened at the end of autumn. My sort of partner found a fairy ring of mushrooms. I not only stepped into the middle, but also poked every mushroom there. Thanks, darling. Why not just leave the door open for the fae to show up? Anyway, since he's played with the fairy circle, I've kept an ear and an eye out for weirdness. He pretty much said to the woods that his prodding was not an invitation inside. Then winter came, and it got cold here, and still is. On this night a couple of weeks ago, it was about 2 or 3 in the morning, and the temperature was a single digit, and my phone said it felt like -3 Fahrenheit. Both me and my partner wake up together, for no real reason that we were able to figure out. We have neighbors to the sides of us, but they're quiet at night. One side has an HOA and is pretty much silent as death after 10 p.m. Our other neighbors right by the road. We acknowledged that we were awake at each other, and well, one of the cats is very excited. We're awake, and it just wants to cuddle. We're unsuccessfully trying to push him away when we all hear it. Whistling. It was so light that the cat's purrs weren't really able to block it out, but he stopped purring and we all heard the whistling in the woods. It was a jaunty little tune, like someone enjoying a stroll, except it was ridiculously cold out and it was coming from the woods. It only lasted for a few seconds, and then the cat went back to purring and blocked it out as if it went longer. I haven't heard it since. Part of me likes to think it's a happy custodian in the high school that I can sometimes just barely hear the loud pep rallies of. But the larger parts knows I call these spooky woods for a reason. My mom and I traveled back in time. This story was around 5 years ago. Both me and my mom remember it to this day. My mom was picking me, an 18-year-old female, but 13 at the time of the story, up from high school at the time. School day ended at around 2:30. I got picked up at around 2:40. We were driving away from the school. The school was out in the country, and on the way into town, we have to cross over one little wooden bridge that goes over a small river. Keep in mind that there's only one bridge on this road with sugarcane fields and gullies on both sides. I remember passing over the bridge before looking at the clock where it read 2:46 p.m. We were talking about a bullying situation that happened at school that day. And about 2 minutes after we crossed the bridge, she said something along the lines of, "So your teacher dealt with the situation?" And as I was about to respond, the tires lost grip of the road and we spun out and the tires skidding and everything. The car behind us started honking their horn, and we screamed as we thought we were heading front first into a gully next to the sugarcane. Then we just weren't. We were back on the road, but it looked and felt super unfamiliar to us. As we were trying to get our bearings, with her still driving a lot slower, we both froze as we saw the bridge that we just passed a couple of minutes prior at about 200 meters on the road in front of us. I started screaming again and freaking out before looking over at the time that read 2:45. I screamed even louder, and it was just really scary. My mom pulled over and started to explain to me that it was just a glitch in the Matrix, and that has happened to her before. I just remember the feeling I had afterwards, and this feeling that everything was off and I didn't feel right. Like I was somewhere I wasn't supposed to be. And even to this day, I haven't been able to shake that feeling. Managed to calm down, but no one I ever told really believed me. To this day, everyone just thinks it's a silly story, but we both remember the details of it so vividly. The feeling of not belonging is somewhat eased as I can ignore it now, but it's still an itching thing in the back of my head. Very hard to explain. That was my introduction to glitches in the Matrix, which led me down the rabbit hole of Mandela effects, ghost stories, more glitches in the Matrix, to actually watching the Matrix series. I've had other really weird things happen to me in life since, but nothing as prominent as that one was. Possible totems. Native American war drums at 3 a.m. So allow me to preface by saying I'm one of Cherokee ancestry. So I've assumed in some way this experience is linked to my ancestry. But it can also be linked to the land attempting to be protected by two innocent and stupid young adults. When I was 21, I decided along with a friend to go ghost hunting at the local sanatorium in Madison, Wisconsin. It was in the woods out back. This was back when Ghost Adventures was just getting big. I was pretty empathetic, or empathic, but at the time that was about it. So we entered the woods and entered a clearing. On the recorder, I picked up this demonic voice saying, "I'm gonna get ya." It's a chilling recording. Probably didn't sound like me saying that. Oops. It's a hot summer night and the clearing is warm. We talked for a while to whatever's there, and then suddenly it's not so warm anymore. It's freezing cold and it's pitch black, like we can see our breath cold. I even put my hand in front of me to see if I could see it. That's how dark it was. I look up and I can't even see the trees, it's so dark. From the negative energy, it was oppressive. I didn't like it. And from the distance, both my friend and I begin to hear the sound of Native American war drums. First, they're faint, but they're getting closer. The overwhelming darkness begins to back off, and as the darkness leaves the clearing, I follow the ground to the woods. Look up to see a family of deer, complete with buck, fawn, and doe. It took me a while to figure out what was so off about them. It wasn't that they were breathing. That's good. It's that they weren't running, that they weren't moving. They were spirits, straight up gray and white, with black eyes. Immediately I was overcome with such dread, not at the animals, but at whatever it was that could hear us behind us. Whatever had leaves and twigs crunching under its feet. The doe nodded at me. A rush of wind nicked up around us. The drums were now at an all-time high, and the chanting was stoking an urgency in my veins that made me grab my friend and run away. Checked in my friend tonight and confirmed the details of the story as it happened 10 years ago. She remembers all the same things. I remember there also being an owl and a squirrel. Later found out that this was the site of one of the Native American wars. After doing some research, I believe I saw totems sent to protect me and my friend or guard the land. Whether they were from my tribe or the ones that died there, I don't know. I'm just wondering what anybody else thinks. Has anybody else experienced something similar in those woods? My friend and I believe someone was possibly there to harm us. Possibly a person drawn to dark energy. I'm not sure. All I can is that she and I are 100% heard and saw the same things. And it's absolutely the most vivid paranormal experience I've ever had. It sounded like an entire Native American army going to war. Also, at the time, there were no events scheduled to explain this drumming. Spooky doggo in the woods. I'm relatively new to Reddit, but I wanted to share this story. I hadn't really thought of it before. When I was young, I was a very awkward kid. I had a lot of difficulty making and keeping friends. I spent most of my time hiking outside of my hometown in the Angeles Nationalist Forest. National. I lived with my grandmother in the town of Wrightwood. I would spend most of my nights out camping, claiming to be going on small trips with my Boy Scout troop, when in reality I would just take my backpacking tent and find a nice secluded canyon to sleep in. Whenever I would sleep in a canyon, I would have strange but comforting dreams, where my childhood dogs Shelby and Lynn would come find me in the woods, huddle up in my sleeping bag to stay warm, and would just sort of talk to her throughout the night about my woes and my accomplishments. It always felt surreal when I woke up and she wasn't there, so I tried to go back as often as possible just so I could see her again. All the way up until I turned 16. I stopped coming to the mountains as often because I was spending a lot of time with my girlfriend down in the high desert. One day, about a year into our relationship, I decided to take her hiking up to my favorite canyon. About halfway up, she slipped and badly twisted her ankle. It was swollen to the size of a grapefruit. I asked her to let me carry her back down, or at least let me tear off a piece of my shirt to use as a sling. She refused, so we continued down. About 10 minutes into our hike down, she said she saw something. I asked her what it was, and she said she didn't know, just movement in her peripherals. Then about 5 seconds later, something scared her so badly she almost fell again. Took her back home and treated her ankle with a sling and a compression wrap. To this day, she still refuses to acknowledge what happened, and I think perhaps that's for the best. When I was 17, we eventually broke up. My mother had gotten into an accident drinking and driving, and she was forcing to kind of move into her grandparents. We couldn't really keep up a long-distance relationship. I continued going to the mountains for 2 relationships and 2 more years. But I never brought somebody up to the mountains with me during that time. I simply spent half my free time with my boyfriend or girlfriend, and the other half in the mountains, dreaming of my childhood dog and bliss. When I was 19, I met a girl who really understood me as a person. Foolishly, I thought that she meant that, she might understand what was happening to me in those mountains. I told her all about my dreams and all about what happened to my first ex. She wanted to try to see for herself. We left at about 8 p.m. and arrived at the base of my favorite canyon at about 9. My then girlfriend and I went hiking up with a flashlight. We had some camping gear too, hoping to spend the night. We spent a good 20 minutes setting up at the site. That's where I cleared all the flammables in about a 5-foot radius and started cooking in my jet boil. We had some dinner, although I can't remember what we ate. I think it was Uncle Ben's rice and some bread. Then we decided to walk around some more. About 20 minutes into this hike, she stopped dead in her tracks. She had seen something moving, just like my first ex. She looked at me and asked me if I saw it too, and I hadn't. Then she took another look, let out a small whisper of a scream. She grabbed me and asked me to take her back to our camp so we could leave. Later, she described to me a scraggly, dark, long-haired dog that looked to be about as tall as her, 5'3", covered in mange and forest debris. She told me it grinned at her, and that its mouth looked almost human. She begged me to never go back there again. She told me whatever was up there wasn't a friend, and that I should never have let that into my life in the first place. I believed her at the time, 5 years out of that forest. And 1 year out of our rocky relationship, I missed the forest more than anything else. I missed my dreams, and I missed the feelings of ease and bliss I got from being there. I want almost more than anything to go back there and spend a night, just to feel like that again. Safe, comfortable, carefree. Should I go back? Maybe just for one night. Or was she right? Is there something here that's dangerous? And if so, why has it never seemed dangerous to me? Why do I feel safest when I'm there? I'd go there. But I'm 2 glasses of wine deep. the second time now something weird woke me up. So as usual, I went to sleep fairly late in my apartment. Slept rather well. I woke up a few times, but that's just because I'm a light sleeper and a lucid dreamer. And sometimes I just lose control of a dream, and that tends to wake me up. I have a free day yesterday, and knowing that I didn't set any alarms, I slept about 9 hours and then I woke up. Well, I kind of woke up. You know, that feeling you have just before you wake up, like you're not even sure who you are really, but couldn't open my eyes. I felt as if a big hand, or something that felt like a hand, was holding my face from the bottom up. Right in a position it could easily choke me if it wanted to. I tried to move or open my eyes, but the more I fought, like the whole area, I felt like the thing was more dead and numb. It felt like a million little needles poking me all at once, but not in a painful, more in a tickling kind of way. I felt it turn my head to the left, and I think somehow I knew it was studying me, looking me up and down. Now when I say it, I'm not sure if I even believe it was a creature or whatever. I'm not one to believe in these things so easily, but I am a lucid dreamer, and I know that when I'm dreaming and when I'm awake, so... Well, also, this is the second time something like this has happened, but let me finish this encounter first. I didn't hear, see, or smell anything while it happened. I just felt the pressure on my face, and slightly my neck, and a sort of wariness around it, like it was a living thing. Now, it's not one of those stories I've heard when it felt like it took hours and the people couldn't fight back. I kept trying to move, and after about 10 seconds, maybe 20, I managed to open my eyes and I saw nothing. At least, nothing out of the ordinary. Just my dimly lit room and the streetlight barely peeking through between the curtains. I turned my light on and I didn't see or feel anything weird. As weird as it sounds, I went straight back to sleep with the lights on this time. I've been thinking about it a lot recently. Figured I'd put it out here somewhere so people could theorize about what it could have been and, well, what I might be able to do to prevent it from, appending again. Happening, probably. Because it wasn't pleasant. But the first time I mentioned it happened, it was a few years ago and thousands of miles from my current residence. About 3 years ago, I was at a friend's house and I decided to stay the night. This was back from here, from when I moved from about a year after this. My friend told me I could sleep in his big guest bedroom while he'll go sleep in his room, so that's what we did. I wanted to sleep, so I kept having this weird feeling like there was something else in the room with me. And being a non-believer, I figured it was a rat or something behind the old furniture my friend had. After about an hour of struggling to fall asleep, I started feeling really cold. Even under 2 layers of blankets, I was freezing. Curled up in a ball in hopes of warming myself up, and after a few more minutes of trying to fall asleep, this weird feeling became unnerving. For lack of a better word, scary. It felt like a primal kind of fear that I've always had, but never experienced before. Then I started to finally snooze off. That's when I felt a chill run down my spine, and I swear I felt something quickly pass over my body. This time I was facing down. At the same time, I swear I heard a loud whisper, like a really loud whisper. It wasn't a word or a cry or anything, like most people say. It was more of a sigh. But like a really loud one, too. Directly into my ear, no less. I also felt pressure on the back for just a moment, but this all happened in like 2 seconds and made me jolt up in shock. Turned on the light, stayed up as long as I could. Nothing else weird happened that night or since. Well, until now. Not sure why I'm writing this. I'm sure most people who read this will think it's fake, and those who do believe me might just not know how to help. I'm telling you it's not fake. Both things happened. I wasn't dreaming. It wasn't sleep paralysis, I know. What it was, I don't know. But again, I'm not really a believer in the paranormal. It might just be my head playing tricks on me, but it sure as hell felt real. So this has me being open to suggestions, I guess. What do you guys think this is, and how can I get rid of it? Could my childhood home have actually been haunted? So So I grew up in a small town of Hot Springs, South Dakota. I lived there until I was about 5. We lived in a small 3-bedroom house that was built in the 1800s. I remember vividly many strange things that happened. My parents do also. I remember once I was sitting on the couch in the living room and was about to go into my room to grab a toy. The room was to the left of my front door walking in, and there was a faint light cast on the bedroom wall from a street lamp outside. The curtains were closed, so it was kind of a fuzzy but semi-bright glow. As I was walking towards a room, a shadow of a man started to cross through the light. Thought it was a shadow from someone walking in the street. However, as I looked at it, this man waved at me. Felt like it looked right at me. It was completely harmless. It didn't really scare me as it seemed friendly, and I was a young kid at the time who didn't really know what ghosts were. I remember that so clearly. I once got a lava lamp, a real fancy tall yellow one. I loved it so much. Except one night I was sleeping on the top bunk of my bed. I had my own bunk bed. I heard a loud bang. I looked down, and the lava lamp is sitting perfectly upright in the middle of the room on the floor. It was unplugged from the wall, and it turns out that lamp broke. My parents still blame me. I know what I saw, and I can't explain how it ended up where it did, or the way that it did, or ended up where it did. Everybody's going to hate me for screwing up. But I continue. I know what I saw, and I can't explain how it ended up where it did, upright without any obvious damage. It just never turned back on, and it was weird. It made me so sad. There was one time I saw a chandelier-looking orb thing come out of the wall at night. It floated into my bed and then to my blanket and got pulled back a little. That was all that happened. But it scared me enough to get my parents. There was nothing off in my room, but it was a weird occurrence. The house had an old mudroom near the back connected to the kitchen. It was open to the outside, and that's where our dogs would sleep. We had 3 dogs, a young golden retriever, rather dumb but harmless, a young Italian greyhound, and another young furry dog that I forgot the breed of. I walked outside during the day once, and I heard a voice coming from a vent. All 3 of the dogs lined up and sat down. The voice was speaking to them. It sounded like a really old woman with a rough voice, speaking past me and to the dogs. Like I had no idea it was there, if that makes sense. I can't remember what it said, but it asked the dogs questions, and they all barked at the same time as an answer. It was truly bizarre. It scared the piss out of me. I ran to get my dad, and he brushed it off, but it was weird. Maybe it was a dream, though. Another time, on my 4th birthday, I got this awesome SpongeBob balloon. One of the foil ones from the store. I woke up at night to the balloon pressing pretty hard against the ceiling. It was slowly dragging across it toward the door. But it was moving like a snail. It scared me so much, I ran and got my parents, and obviously they were pissed since it was in the middle of the night, but my dad got up to check anyways. He actually saw the same thing. Watched the balloon pull itself under the door frame and into the living room. It scared the shit out of him. He immediately popped it and threw it away. He and I still remember that to this day. Can't explain it. My parents said that they encountered many weird things as well. I had a little toy that would talk if you pressed buttons. And they said every time that they would walk into the room, the toy would say, "Hello there," which happened if you pressed a button. And when they left, it would say, "Goodbye, friend." They hated that toy. My grandma had the same thing happen to her and hated it too. It was not motion activated or anything. That furry dog I was talking about earlier would also growl a good amount at night. Parents found it locked in the closet multiple times. No idea how the dog got in there, but it did. That dog ended up attacking me one day, nearly ripping my eye out. I usually put it down, but I found it strange how that was the only dog that ever growled for no reason and got locked into random closets. I know that's a lot of stuff, but it's all very clear to me. I know I was young, but there are such clear memories. My parents can sort of back me up with the weird things that happened. The house also had the previous owner die in it before they bought it. It's not unusual for the area, as it's a pretty old town. So many people died all over in many houses. I personally think that whatever was in there was totally harmless and wanted to protect me. My very young sister at the time, nothing was ever done to harm us. But with the friendly wave and the communication through the toy, the way it sort of locked up the dog that eventually attacked me and broke a possible dangerous lamp is kind of soothing to think back to. I wanted to share these memories and ask if, well, stuff seems believable. I know I was really young, so it might not be real. My friends and I used a Ouija board, and a glass ashtray busted in half. So when I was in high school, my friends and I were into really spooky shit. We had no business messing around with it. We would visit cemeteries at night, go to our small town local haunt spots, to try to stir up any urban legends. The story I'm about to tell us kind of quit cold turkey trying to seek out the paranormal. One night we went over to our friend's century-old home. I mean, it was an old and creaky home, and the perfect setting for a night of Ouija. We brought it out, and for the first half hour nothing insane happened, just some movement from the planchette. Then, feeling smug, I asked the spirits what my middle name was. The thing is, my middle name is literally made up by my parents. It's not a real name. So one in the circle knew, let alone couldn't spell my middle name. There was literally no way somebody could even guess it, but the board knew. Spelled my middle name perfectly. I could feel my heart fall into my gut. Keep in mind, my hands were not on the planchette, so I couldn't have moved it myself. Everybody laughed because of what a silly middle name that would be, but I had to confess that it was mine, and the color drained from everyone's face. All of a sudden, a glass ashtray was sitting a few feet away on the coffee table, split clean in two. We were done. We left the house to go stay somewhere else, and fortunately, never experienced anything that terrifying again. Angel of Revenge. Back in 2017, during the solar eclipse, it was a kind of celebration day in the U.S. The eclipse was set to happen midday where I was. My coworkers and I were encouraged to step outside when the eclipse started, and to see it. I went out and saw the eclipse with everyone. Then when I went back in and was going back to work, for some reason I went back out. There were still a few people standing around. Looked up again, sensed a powerful entity up there traveling with the eclipse. It wasn't visual, it was just a strong impression. My mind's eye sensed the spirit was traveling with the eclipse, taking notes of all the abuses that people have inflicted. I sensed it was a spirit of revenge. I was going to take revenge for the abuses. Anyway, it was working very fast, like it was looking down at the population in large swaths. I guess it sensed me looking at it, and it saw me too. I didn't get the impression it had a lot of time to stop and think about someone like me. It was a short experience. It left a strong impression on me, though. Even if a part of that impression is the day-to-day life of humans, it's barely a blip on the radar of angels. And I'm kind of irritated, since I'm not some spiritual person. I feel like there should be a spiritual person who saw it with, everybody looking at the eclipse. I mentioned it briefly that day to around 2 people on Facebook who read my posts, and I told my mom. Also searched on Twitter and mentioned it somewhere months ago. At some level, I was waiting for someone important to say something. Dark negative energy. Mass above me while lying in bed. Last night I was getting ready for bed as I lay down and I was finishing up a YouTube video that I was watching. Hopefully it'll be my new YouTube channel that's popping up soon. When I finished, I leaned over to the side of my bed and plugged in my phone after setting my alarm for the morning. When I rolled back over to have my nightly prayer, I noticed a black mass over my body. It was a black fog that was partially transparent, but it felt heavy and had a density to it. It felt like very negative energy, like a mass floating above me. I immediately sat up on my bed and I noticed that I started to feel high, as if I'd taken a drug or something. It felt like a head rush and it kept getting stronger and stronger. At the time, I noticed multiple different frequencies started ringing in my ears very loudly. There's at least 3 different pitched frequencies. I was hearing these things ringing in my ears. And no, it wasn't just my tinnitus picking up. I have tinnitus, my ears ring 24/7 at the same pitch every single day, so I'm very aware of that. This was multiple different frequencies. They were layered on top of one another. It almost felt as if something was trying to make contact with me. I decided to turn on the light in my room and use the bathroom because I have a bad habit of slamming water before I go to bed. Checked both the doors to make sure that they were locked, got back to my bedroom to lay down again and see if the energy was still there. As soon as I turned off the lights again and I lay down in my bed, I felt the same negative energy vacating my room. By the way, at this point, and also while I was going to the bathroom and walking around my house, the loud ringing in my ears continued and hadn't stopped. I also said to myself as I was walking to the bathroom, what the fuck is this noise? If there's anything trying to contact me, I can't hear what you're saying. This is just annoying and doesn't feel good. I feel sick from this. This is only disturbing me and not making any sense, so please stop. So there I was laying down for a second time and still feeling almost sick, but with loud noises in my ear and feeling a negative energy in my room. That's when I started to pray. I asked for God's help. I repeated over and over that we don't allow any negative energy in this house, and we only allow love and positivity in this house, and everything other than that needs to leave at once. I repeated this for maybe 5 or 10 times, and I also envisioned a white light in my head beaming all around the room. I envisioned every room in the house, and shining a white light through the entire thing while I sort of continued chanting for anything negative to leave. I was also looking and asking for God to rid anything negative. As I envisioned this white light beaming through the house, the color white in my head would get brighter and brighter and feel stronger and stronger. After that 5 to 10 minutes of everything, it just completely shifted. It felt lighter. The negativity was gone. I didn't feel nauseous anymore, and there was finally silence in my ears. I knew that my efforts had finally worked. And then after a few more minutes, I started to feel warmth and good energy in the room. It made me feel safe and welcoming to fall asleep. That's when I finally felt like I was safe. One last detail I just remembered is that I have our house washer and dryer in my room. It's the only hookup spot. Fucking annoying. My roommate was in my room yesterday doing kind of laundry. I was going to have a talk with him later today, and I asked him if he was having any negative thoughts or energy around him while he was in the room where I was sleeping while he was doing the laundry. Because I can't control his energy before he goes to my room, but I can have a talk with him about it for the next time. I know this probably sounds crazy, but I've been having experiences like this my entire life, and I'm now 28 years old. When I was a kid, I remember hearing voices and seeing shadows all the time at the relative's house. Throughout my adult life, I've had extremely similar situations to the ones I've just described here. That's why I knew I had to ask God to help and envision a white light over my house. Earlier in life, I would have just given up and fallen asleep with the negativity in the room feeling scared. But since this has happened multiple times, I now know the steps I need to take in order to rid negative energy in my room. I've lived in multiple states, Michigan, Tennessee, and Florida. As of the last 10 years, I've had the craziest and most reoccurring experiences while living in Tennessee, and secondly in Michigan, but almost none in Florida, which is interesting, as I lived alone in Florida and always had roommates while in the other states. So maybe it does have something to do with other people's energy, and maybe I'm just more sensitive to it. Has anyone had a similar experience to this? And like I said, similar things have been happening to me for the better part of my life, and every time I tell my friends or family about it, they can't relate to me. My only experience. Anyone seen anything similar? I was 8. Woke up from a vivid nightmare around 4 a.m. The nightmare involved bright green locusts and porcelain dolls. I lay awake for a while, and I was spooked from the dream and couldn't get back to sleep, so I decided to go downstairs and watch TV until it was time to get ready to go to school. I was sat on a sofa facing the TV. The door to the upstairs was to the right of the TV, and I had glass panels. As I was watching the TV, I could see out of the corner of my eye a light into the doorway to upstairs. I looked toward it and saw this figure, a glowing pale bluish shape, with an open robe and hood. No face or features, but two eyes brightly shining orange or red. It was beckoning me forward with its left hand, making a "come here" motion with its finger. I don't think I ever felt more terror like that before. Slapped my hands to my face, hid my eyes from the figure. I remember feeling trapped, as I didn't want to open my eyes, and I had nowhere to go. I was either upstairs, straight through past the figure, or into the kitchen behind me. I must have had a rush of adrenaline as I ran, and my eyes closed shut straight back upstairs, passing whatever might have been there in the doorway. I did the standard diving back in the bed, hid under the covers. I waited until my dad got up for work. It was about 5:30 a.m. Remember, kind of keep going into his room and asking him if he was getting up soon. Especially, he woke up and headed downstairs, and I followed behind. No sign of anything. My heart was beating, and I was still terrified. I followed him all the way from the kitchen to the bathroom and stood virtually behind him as he took his morning pee. I kind of plucked up the courage to tell him what I saw. He was a no-nonsense type. "Dad, I saw a ghost." And he just replied, "No, you didn't. It was your imagination." And that was that. I'd have been inclined to believe him. I was a pretty weird kid. I loved horror, monsters, and paranormal, but I never experienced anything like this before. The whole feeling of the night was strange. I remember it now all these years later like it was yesterday. I maybe thought the nightmare I had sent my imagination into overdrive, that the light was reflecting from my TV onto the glass panels in the doorway, and my overactive brain translated that into the image of a phantom. That's just one thing that doesn't let me dismiss it completely. I found out that when I came downstairs that night, I wasn't alone. Our cat was there too. Fugly. Nice name. A big silver Persian cat that my stepmom owned. My dad thought it was hideous, hence the name Fugly. This was one of those cats that was so docile and goofy you could do anything to it and it would just purr. Just didn't seem to have a bad bone in its body. Let kids pick it up and ragdoll, and it was super affectionate. Followed my dad out the bathroom, walked to the kitchen, spotted Fugly in one of the dining room chairs tucked underneath the table. Bent down to look at her. She was severely spooked, her eyes like saucers and her fur and hair was on end. She was nearly twice her size. I did the pss and put my hand toward her. She hissed, scratched my hand, and drew a small amount of blood. This really stayed with me, as I'd never seen her like this before, and even after, she never displayed this behavior. Has anyone had an experience like this? The last story of this evening. I moved into my apartment approximately 9 years ago. It was a factory that had been converted into lofts in the early 2010s. I felt compelled to make this post because there's been some limited and strange experiences I've had over the years that led me down the rabbit hole. It made me aware of an unsolved murder that occurred on the property in 1998. And I'm just wondering if this lines up with any other experiences out there. Shortly after I moved in, I was living on my own. I had an experience where I'd fallen asleep in front of the TV, and when I woke up and got up from the couch, I stepped into a thick puddle of liquid that was not there when I fell asleep. The puddle was probably 30 centimeters in diameter. There was no obvious explanation in terms of air ducts, underlying pipework, and I didn't have any liquid I was drinking that could have fallen over. The liquid was not water, it was thick, viscous, smelled like coconuts, almost like shampoo. I just cleaned it up, called my parents to see if there could be an explanation, and they said it was just a monitor. But it could have been a leak elsewhere that moved there. I never experienced anything like this again, but the experience led me to searching online for answers. Online, when I searched for explanations of liquid appearing, it gave me normal answers, but also led me to discussions about poltergeists. They discounted, basically rationalized, that there usually had to be some sort of trauma, and so unless something bad had happened on the property, I couldn't likely discount the theory. Can't say I was a true skeptic, but I'm definitely somebody who'd rather not poke and find things I would rather not find. Long story short, I discovered that my building was previously a factory, and that in 1998 the owner was murdered in the parking lot. The case is still unsolved, although a police officer was quoted in the news as saying they know who did it, but there wasn't enough evidence to prosecute. When I had discovered this, I kind of made the link and simply mentioned the story to people in the building and friends and mentioned about the strange liquid appearing. Chalked it up to this murdered soul trying to get some acknowledgement. And ever since, I've been telling the story. I haven't heard any other real physical experience, but recently I started to sense I've been getting other experiences. For the past year, whenever I work from home in the office, where I sit at the right closest to the street, I've been having a recurring kind of feeling or sense of getting shot by a gun in the head. Whoa. Or at least what I imagine it would feel like to get shot. I get this feeling when I'm awake, and they aren't dreams. It's like my mind drifts to it. Hard to explain. It's like the memory of a car coming by, and I feel my head kind of clock back violently. This has been a reoccurring kind of memory or irrational fear that comes and goes, but it's been happening for like a year, and only when it's dark outside. I think this might be the spirit trying to communicate how they felt when they got murdered. When I first researched the murder, I didn't pay attention to where the victim was shot, but I just went back to review the news article, and they mentioned it was an organized mob hit with a getaway car. The 3 men who shot the victim, once in the head and twice in the stomach. I just made the link between the reoccurring memory and the shot to the head. Murder happened at 7 in the morning, and my stomach tends to randomly hurt at that time for like 30 minutes, then completely fine the rest of the day. This isn't every day, but here or there. Has anyone had any similar experiences? Is there anything I could do to put the spirit at ease? I can provide news article proof to my mods, but I don't really want to publicly release all the information for privacy reasons. Look forward to seeing you guys again. See ya.